Hi there, video fans. So it's the 25th of June, and right now there are a lot of heartbroken Westerners and Ukrainians. Hope none of them committed suicide from the bad news. Well, I give out to most of the Western leadership rope, soap, and something else with pleasure. Little bastards. Anyways, so yeah, we had our little, I guess you could call it a civil war. Prigozhin, I don't know whether he was bought by the West or is fully his own idea. So he started this little coup, or something of the sort. He claimed that one of his rear bases got hit by aviation, 2 bombs dropped on him, and because of that he had to organize 2 columns to grab hold of Rostov, where the staff for the southern military district is headquartered at, and another column going north toward Moscow. So the guy's got about 20,000 troops under his belt. Well, as a professional military officer, I can tell you this: you don't organize serious columns in half an hour or an hour, as he said, and drive out. So this was pre-planned, well pre-planned. Whether or not there was a strike, there's no reason to for the Russian military to strike Wagner. So it's all bullshit. So whether or not he has his own planes, as a matter of fact, he has his own ground attack aircraft. So whether he dropped bombs on his own guys, or whether it even ever happened, you know, it could be another American version of Bay of Tonkin, which never happened but launched Vietnam, nonetheless. Well, we don't know that yet. But either way, he used that as an excuse. So they grabbed the center of Rostov, which has very few military personnel. It's mostly staff, ash and trash staff. So combat soldiers are all at the front. So he got out there middle of the night, grabbed the key intersections, grabbed key infrastructure. Luckily, nobody was killed. They were starting to pull up troops to counter him. So Rosgvardia, the Russian Guard, kind of like an active National Guard, I guess, they were being pulled up. And the column that was heading north, I have word from an eyewitness who said he was getting off the main interstate, which was blocked. He was delivering a truck down to the front, and he was turning around to go back to Moscow, and wound up. This is still pretty far south. It's about 800 kilometers south of Moscow. Wound up in the tail section of the column of the Wagner guys. So there were already a couple of vehicles that had been destroyed, and they were reloading equipment into other vehicles and moving wounded and dead out of the way. So they got hit. Nobody was going to let them come into Moscow. And second of all, I don't know what the hell they were thinking. You know, even if you send 8,000 guys to take Moscow, a city of 17 million, there are enough police, Rosgvardia, Kremlin Guard, and etc., to stop these guys before you pull in the heavy units. So, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking. A lot of these guys, some of the Wagner units surrendered on the spot. They said, we're not going to fight against our own. And they asked to have Rosgvardia and the police come in there, escort them to their base, and they were going to set it out. So right off the bat, it wasn't all 20,000 following Prigozhin and his commanders. Now, I'm not sure. It hasn't been published what percentage actually didn't go. So the majority that went down into Rostov, and then those guys that were left in the rear of the front, they were surrounded right off the bat, which was bad because by having to surround them, they were east of Artyomovsk. And Artyomovsk is the only place the Ukrainians are having around Artyomovsk, or Bakhmut, north and south of it, is the only place the Ukrainians are having any success moving forward. And when I'm saying moving forward, they're grabbing maybe 1-2 small positions a day, every other day. They get knocked out, and they're slowly moving forward, but at a very high cost. Back and forth battles against Russian airborne in the north of Artyomovsk, and one of the mechanized infantry brigades in the south. There's a little bit of movement forward. We're talking about, your yards for you standard stuck people. But since Prigozhin's guys, the Wagner guys, were to the east of Artyomovsk in camps, part of the defensive line had to be pulled off to surround them. So the Yukis were moving a large contingent of what's left of their reserve for their great offensive, which is about half done. Half done, I mean, is in dead and wounded and burned equipment. So they've got about maybe half the force they had at the start 3 weeks ago, and nothing to show for it. I mean, they haven't gotten out of the security zone. They haven't gotten to the first line of defense. They can't get through a security zone, which is designed, if you don't understand what a security zone is, security zone is designed to break up enemy columns and force them into combat formations, which slows them down, wears out the equipment, destroys some of the equipment, takes time off the scale, allows for artillery and airstrikes, as the enemy has to be already deployed in combat formation and moving slowly because of that, as opposed to moving fast in column. So this is kind of, it's supposed to be a speed bump, a very big speed bump to slow the enemy down, suck up his fuel, suck up his ammunition, tire him out. Except that for the Yukis, our security zone speed bump has turned into the Great Wall of China. They can't get through it. The positions, a couple of villages they've taken, they were empty. These are villages that were in lowland areas where the Russian army just pulled back up to the hills surrounding them and just started shelling the crap out of whatever is moving. I mean, one of those villages has like 10 houses in it. And big village. It's not even a hamlet. But that's what's being portrayed as the great move forward by Western press. It's ahead of the timelines. They've captured 100 square kilometers. Okay, so in those areas that they've been attacking, in width, we're talking about maybe 50 to 70 kilometers. So in depth, maybe a kilometer and a half at most. Doesn't sound that much, does it? When you start breaking out that way. That's how you get lied to and fooled into supporting your own deaths and dismemberments, because guess what happens next? Next, the West has to up the stakes. They're hoping for this little civil war. So back to Prigozhin and his guys. So these guys, Prigozhin is a huge PR man. He's not military. Let's start with that. He organized this company with government money, and Wagner was doing the Russian government's mission in countries like various countries of Africa, where the U.S. or in this case the French were heavily influencing the governments. And what I mean by heavily influencing the governments, these former French colonies, the French would topple the government every so often if they weren't paying them their Danesgeld every year. Yeah, these guys, all these former colonies are still paying tribute to France every bloody year. So the French won't come in there and attack them, overthrow their government. So what the French do is they keep a high level of chaos in these countries. They alarm and hire various gangs to overthrow the governments the moment the governments are showing any national tendencies, to take care of their own people. They don't want to pay or give up key resources to French companies. I mean, the French are bastards in this. I mean, absolute. The French government is just absolute bastards. And they're exploiting these people, 50 years after, 40 years after they've left. And nothing's changed, basically. And the French are the cause of Central West Africa's just horrendous human poverty and loss of lives. Oh yeah, that little Macron bastard and his Twinkies that read us the Riot Act. If you really look at what most every single Western government does, they are not human. They're not even subhuman. They're satanic in the extreme. The amount of blood and suffering that they cause around the world is insane. I mean, parasitic states, basically. What they can't suck off their own peasants, they'll suck off of the rest of humanity if they get a chance to. So anyways, there Wagner was doing well. And that's what they were created for. And they've helped these governments stabilize. They helped these governments defeat various French-owned or hired militias and gangs. They brought stability. So these the people in these governments and the civilians in these governments, they're very pro-Russian because for the first time they're actually getting rid of the French for real. Now, in Russia, Wagner cannot operate legally, so they're in a gray zone. And they were pulled in because at the beginning of the fighting, there weren't enough combat troops for the level of fighting that was instigated. The Russian army is growing almost twice, on a permanent basis, twice the size. They'll probably grow more. So these guys were reamed as heroes and so on. And Wagner really did use a lot of their guys as just human waves. They're volunteers, and quite a few of them were maybe about 20% were criminals, who were given passes on their sentences if they went and fought for 6 months. But I mean, these weren't the criminals like serial murderers or rapists or anything like that. They were guys that were in for murder, usually murder manslaughter. You're either in a drunken state, they got in a fight and they hit somebody upside the head with something, or they were drunk behind the wheel and they killed somebody. So they were in for that kind of stuff. Robbery, things like that. So not planned homicide, but manslaughter, robbery, etc. So a lot of these guys, I mean, they're deemed as heroes because they fought well and they fought well for the motherland. And here they go, and they basically are committing treason. Not basically, I mean, they're committing treason. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what they were told, but the response they got was, whoa, buddy, what the hell are you doing? They were told the public would be behind them. The public was not behind them. The public was very, very critical right off the bat of what they were doing. And people in Rostov told them to their faces, you're treason. This is treason, and you're traitors. So these guys really didn't like that epithet, and they didn't want to fight for whatever Prigozhin's goals were at the moment, his political goals and such. So Prigozhin lost a lot of that support instantly. So Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who's known Prigozhin for 20 years, asked Putin to intervene. And Prigozhin originally said, just give me the Minister of Defense and the head of the armed forces, because they're traitors. We'll take care of them. We're not against the president. Well, I'm not thrilled with Shoigu. He's a very good technocrat administrator, and he did an excellent job reorganizing and creating probably the best emergency services ministry in the world. And that's why he was moved into the Ministry of Defense, to reorganize it and make it efficient. But he's not a military man in any kind of sense. Sure, symbolically, they made him a general, because that's somebody who has to be a head of defense minister, has to be a general, symbolically. But he's not a military man in any sense of the word. And he's not efficient right now. We should be a lot more efficient than we are. But he's the political guy that the president has put into place. And whether I like him or not, I mean, sure as hell don't want to live where a guy with a sledgehammer and a private army gets to decide who's a traitor and who's a patriot and can remove ministers. And nobody else wants to live under that kind of rule. So, and while Prigozhin was made by Putin as far as Wagner on government money, I guess he thought he could keep support from Putin because he's only targeting his minister. Well, Putin correctly put right off the bat that Prigozhin's a traitor, and he will be dealt with all severity, and anybody who follows him will be dealt with all severity. And that put a big stop sign in front of a lot of those Wagner guys that are still following Prigozhin. That you have now been instantly labeled traitors, and you will be dealt with. And they sure as hell didn't like that. They pump up their own myth that they're coming to save Russia, and nope. So Lukashenko stepped in, and he's gotten Prigozhin. Prigozhin will be allowed to leave into exile in Belarus. What happens to him next, we'll live and see. But he's out of Wagner. Wagner is no longer in his hands. And all those Wagner guys that still want to fight are now going to have to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. It'll be contracted soldiers. Just like every volunteer unit has had to sign. Wagner was the only one that didn't sign. By that point, I was pretty sure something was going to happen. Because Prigozhin was getting more and more bellicose. And before that, he was making odd jokes like on video. Like, I will be the president of Ukraine. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, we can see right through that and his ambitions. So, at this point, it's over. Everybody that committed crimes, and there were some small combat occurrences, I'm sure they're probably going to get tried for treason. Everybody who didn't, which is the vast majority, get to either sign a contract and continue fighting now as part of the Russian military, or they go home. Wagner still exists, but we'll see what happens to it, because its job is not in Russia. Its job is in Africa and Asia and places like that. Help throwing off that colonial rule from the West. Really throwing it off this time. And Prigozhin, will live and see what happens to him. Charges have been dropped against him because he's gone into exile, so we'll see. Considering his main cheerleaders were the Russian Nazis fighting for Ukraine, Zelensky, the West, these aren't exactly the best people to have on your side as your cheerleaders. So it is what it is. But no civil war. So for all those Westerners who are all cheering and all bushy, big-eyed and bushy-tailed that, oh, Russia's going to rip itself apart, yay, all the Russians are going to kill each other, yay, go fuck yourselves. We're still coming for you. And twice as hard now. As for all of our friends, God bless.